Scope and priorities. Okay, so the first thing we want to know is where should we start? Usually companies have, as we mentioned in the previous block, hundreds, thousands, or millions of different processes that they could manage or they could automate. So we have to decide with which of these projects we're going to start first. Here we have a graphical representation of all kinds of different processes that are related to administration, to sales, to marketing, to production, to management, and we have costs and people involved. Okay, so the objective is to find the processes that will have a greater impact and profit, obviously, but we're going to go over some tips to choose the key processes that will help us get started, because we also have to take into account some of the details. So sometimes it's difficult to know which processes we should automate and which ones are going to create a better return on investment. So here I'm going to just mention a few processes that are usually quite complicated to get a good return on investment. It's not that we cannot control and automate it, of course we can, but it might take us some more time, or they might be a little bit more complicated. And then we have some other processes that are much easier. Okay, so let's say we have different processes that have a strong creative component, like fashion design or painting artwork. These are a bit more difficult. Then we also have processes that might be related to perception and manipulation, okay, like a checkup in the doctor. We have to learn how to cook. So these are different processes that might be a little bit more complicated to automate. Processes that require social intelligence, persuasion, negotiation, okay? And then there's all kinds of other processes that we already know that most companies are automating them, such as booking management, expense management, material equipment, sales, invoicing, and there's hundreds more. In other occasions, it's just going to be a matter of numbers. For example, let's say we want to automate a credit check process where our customers can request credit online, and this credit check that has to be done is going to have a cost for the company of, let's say, $5. It's just a number. And we have 5 daily loan requests per branch, and we have 10,000 branches, so that would sum up to this amount of dollars per day. Okay, obviously this is just a representation. I don't know if the numbers are right, but just to get an idea. Okay, so let's imagine we want to digitalize these processes and get 60% of the loan requests approved manually, thanks to business rules, automatic calculations, and so on. Okay, so this is what we could call a robot. A robot's working for us. So this would give us a few savings per day. Obviously, that's quite a big sum of money. And besides, thanks to the digitalization, the requests can be approved from any device and anywhere. So it's estimated that approvers are going to be able to perform their tasks even faster with more efficiency. And we're going to have an improvement of 20%. That would be some savings of about $20,000 per day, for example. So at the end, we sum up the numbers and we can see that the amount of savings per day is really high if we were able to automate or digitalize our processes. Obviously, this is a very clear example of a process that must be automated within a company because the return on the investment is going to be very high. It doesn't matter how much the rollout costs. It's never going to be more expensive than this, especially with an application like AuraPortal, where you can automate things really quickly without having to program and all this that we've already mentioned. So this is a very clear example that you must start automating this process. Now, there's all kinds of processes in the company. Lots of times management or let's say the business goals or what they're trying to target for a certain year involves trying to improve a certain process that requires a lot of resources. Maybe it's just carried out a few times a year, so it's very complex. People don't really remember how they have to tackle it. And besides, there's only specific roles of people who can actually manage or interact in the activities of that process. So this is almost a headache for the company, so they really want to automate this. So when you want to offer this company a system that can automate their processes, they're probably going to tell you, yes, please automate process X. This is the one that's giving us most problems. But then there's maybe dozens or hundreds of other processes within the company. For example, process Z that requires very few resources, is carried out thousands of times a year. And so, as it says here, it's just a joke, even a monkey could do it. Okay, so obviously the company isn't really focused on these processes because they think, okay, this is something that we already have under control. And even though people are doing all of this manually, well, we almost prefer to go and tackle this process X. Now, many companies are considering the automation because they have a large process that takes up too much time and money. So that's the one they want to automate first. But what we have to do in our first projects is look at the smaller ones, the more basic processes, the ones that we can automate, let's say quicker and easier. We can have them ready, end up and running in maybe a couple of weeks at the most. And of these, there's probably dozens, or if not hundreds, of simple processes that we could address before trying to tackle our mammoth. Okay. As it says here, think big, start small, and grow fast. So if we try to focus on the most complex processes, we don't have enough experience. This is like trying to teach a child to read when they don't even know how to speak yet. So it's much better to get the small steps done first. And once we've trained ourselves, once we have the experience, and once we know we can actually do this right, then we can start managing bigger and more complicated processes. It's fundamental to prioritize the processes that must be implemented. We have to try to identify those that are going to bring a better strategic value to the business, and we have to leave those that have a higher risk and might be more expensive for later on. Okay, so here we have an example of a company that has several projects. Maybe each project has 2, 3, 10 processes, several reports, and so on. So they actually want to digitalize lots of different parts of their company. They have project A, maybe for sales, project B, maybe for training, project C, maybe that's for the development department, and project D, maybe it's for, I don't know, processes related to management. So which one should we automate first? Obviously, we should try to go for those who have a much higher strategic value and have a lower risk. Once we have those managed, maybe we could continue with other projects that have a bit of a higher risk, or maybe they don't have so much value, but they're still important for the company. And then obviously whatever is very complicated or has a very high risk of having to invest a lot or whatever, those should be left for later on. Okay, so even though sometimes the priority in our company, maybe it's this process that's for management. So the managers are like, come on, we want to get rid of this. We really want to manage or automate this process first. If we're learning, if we're starting, it might not be the best idea. Okay, so we might want to manage these simpler processes or processes that have much lower risk. For example, let's say we're an airline company, and maybe there's a process that it could create a very big impact in the company because it involves all of the customers of the company. Maybe it would make it easier for them to check in online or whatever. So obviously this could be very interesting, but the risk of this not turning on, let's say we're not capable of implementing this perfectly or correctly, they're quite high because we still don't have so much experience. So why would we try to grab this large process, this process that affects all of our customers? If we get something wrong, it's going to be a disaster. Okay, so I'd recommend anyone when they're starting to just try to grab maybe a smaller process first, one that only involves people, internal people within the company. For example, let's say a room reservation process where people can check in and say, I want to check in this hour at this day, this room, I don't know, for a certain meeting, and I can manage that, or I can automate it through a process so that no one else can block that same room on that same time. This can be easily done. It doesn't affect everyone. It doesn't affect all of our customers. It just affects maybe internal employees within the company. And it's going to give us a lot of experience. Once we have enough experience with this process, maybe we can start managing bigger things, things that could affect the entire company or all of our customers. So as it says here, how much should we take on? This is something that happens quite often to people who are starting with a BPMS tool. They maybe they have a company or they're a technological company and they're offering services to their customers. And obviously the customer has a lot of requests. They have a lot of projects that they want to automate. So they send in a lot of information. Okay, so here we've got our onboarding process. Here we have our product request process. Here we have our training process, and here we have this other process. And we want to automate everything. Obviously, this is interesting. We are going to be able to manage everything with time, but sometimes what some people have done is they try to manage everything at once. Okay, so for example, here we have a scenario where there's a company who wants to automate 10 processes. Okay, in this scenario, they're not going to see a result until the end of November. So what's going to happen here? Let's say we start compiling information at the beginning of the year. It's an important company. They have a lot of processes. They want to automate them all. And we say, okay, let's start to compile the information of all those dozens or hundreds of processes, or in this example, 10 processes. And then when it comes to March, we can start with the analysis. After that, we can start with the planification. After that, we start with the implementation in July. So here we're already starting to build things. And maybe we have a few integrations with other systems. So we need to integrate with an ERP. We need to integrate with maybe a database that we already had in our company. And finally, when it comes to November, we can tell the customer, you're ready to go. It's all been implemented. It's already ready for you to roll out throughout your company and start using it. The problem here is that it's very difficult to keep someone engaged in your automation when you're not giving them any results until the end of the year. This is a reason why some consultants have actually failed with their projects, because they've tried to manage too much at once. Okay, so instead of this, maybe a process at a time would have been better. Okay, if they would have done it this way, maybe at the end of the first month, they would have already been able to give their customer a result. Okay, so obviously this is going to help the customer understand what the return on investment is. They're going to be seeing that from the beginning of the year, they already had something that could help them work better and easier. So throughout the year, they're going to be receiving more and more and more. And at the end of November, they're going to be happy. They're going to be happy because throughout the entire year, they've been seeing results. If you try to grab too much work at once, this might be quite difficult. It might even disengage our customers. So we have to be careful with this too. Besides, it's very important to get the management support. So we have to make sure that the company's management is involved and that they understand all the needs. They also have to understand the investment that's going to be made and the return on the investment that they're going to receive. Okay. So the project is not going to be successful if these people don't understand and they don't support the initiative. This is another reason why some consultants have tried to implement a project, for example, in the public administration. And since this public administration changes every 4 years, well, maybe you start working, and 3 months later, instead of Democrats, we have someone else there, and the project doesn't go on. Okay, because whoever came in doesn't have faith in this type of product or whatever. So it's very important to make sure that the project is carried out and continues regardless of the possible changes.